She said, "You know how Christmas is on Jesus' birthday? Well, whose birthday do you think that it is on Halloween? You do the math." What does that mean? What is that? Hello, heathens. My name is Maymay Graves. I am a musician and drag queen who used to preach in the Church of Christ. That didn't work out in my favor, but I love to talk about it. Also, yes, I have facial hair sometimes. This is kind of the drag that I use whenever I DJ. I really wanted to give myself a break. I actually took yesterday's show off because I needed a crazy mental break, because guess who had a full manic episode the past 2 days? That was me. Yes, I'm a female woman, and sometimes I have mental issues, and I appreciate everybody's patience with me because this video is a few days late. So be patient with me, be nice, please. So today we are answering questions. I have kind of a 2-part project going on with this and talking about my past. I know that I wanted to put these ideas together in one video, but there were so many questions, and there's so much to go over with my past in the Church of Christ and in an evangelical Christian school, that I need to kind of focus on scripting that and structuring that the way that I want to so that I can present it in a certain way. Also, there are crazy parts of my life that I'm actually writing a book about that I really want to touch on, and touch on in an appropriate manner. There was a murder at my private Christian school with one of my classmates, and that was a very deep rooted issue within just the Christian community in general in my hometown. And so I really do want to talk about it in a respectful way. And so with all of that being said, I have some questions that I would love to answer. Thanks to all of you new subscribers. I really appreciate y'all. Thank you. Welcome to the cult. Stick around, get to know me, get to know the kind of person that I am, and hopefully I won't scare you away. So without further ado, let's answer your questions. Question number 1, Ready to Sign, says, "I'm not the only gay who grew up in the church and was obsessed with calf muscles." Well, okay, so here's the thing. I don't know what it was. I was a very asexual person for a very long time in my life. That's not the case anymore, but I don't know. Maybe it was purity culture. Maybe it was me just abstaining from everything. I don't know what it was, but in high school, whenever I was a teenager, I was obsessed with calf muscles. I think it's also because I wasn't the most fit person at my school. I just spat. I was the only one not in athletics. But I had just this hyper fixation on calf muscles, which looking back, that's kind of adorable. Anyway, Jimmy Benoit 3426, I believe is how you say that, says, "New sub, old ally. The algorithm dropped this wonderful video, and I'm so glad it did. Please share your story with us. I would love to learn about your awakening, so to speak. I started questioning Christianity when I was very young, raised Southern Baptist. When did you start having an understanding of your true self? Also, your makeup is flawless. Time to go down the rabbit hole of your videos. You're so beautiful." Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. I don't know. So with my awakening, it was such a long process. I remember just liking boys. I wasn't really shy about saying it, but I was kind of beat into the closet as a kid once I started to realize oh, this isn't cool. I started hearing what the preachers were saying, what my dad was saying, what my family was saying in general. One of the big moments was 2007, 2008. Those 2 summers, I believe, were my biggest hurdle of figuring out who I was. I had a crazy, insane, I guess you could say it was a real awakening, but in my opinion, it was more so a dissociative episode. I remember coming home that summer from school before the summer started and kind of realizing that I had all this time to myself. And I started to really think about who I was and where my individuality came from and why I was so weird and why my interests were so weird. And I remember being in my bedroom and just staring at the ceiling, and usually around that time was whenever I would pray about it and think about it. And that was, I think, the first time that I really had an out-of-body experience and just kind of looked at myself and looked around the room and I said, this isn't me. This isn't my room. I don't recognize any of these things that I've accumulated, and I don't recognize this person standing in front of me. Metaphorically, of course. So I guess that was the beginning. And then around those summers, I stayed up. I have really bad insomnia. a lot of sleep issues, a lot of sleep paralysis episodes, and I still have them to this day. I remember staying up until about 4 or 5 in the morning, sneaking out just to be alone with myself in the woods, and also downloading a lot of illegal music on LimeWire. And I realized that I really wanted to be a musician. I really wanted to be in this music-based culture. I feel like to this day, I'm still trying to appease that kid that was just trying to figure out who they wanted to be. And also, I remember going to Hot Topic for the first time because I kind of wasn't allowed whenever I was a kid, but around 7th, 8th grade, I had girlfriends. Like, I would go out into the mall and, like, you know, we would just run around wild. Lesser known artists would have, like, flyers that they would send out to different Hot Topic stores for their new albums or their new projects, new EPs. And I remember there was one for the Birthday Massacre, which is the first alternative style of band that I learned about. And I remember taking one of those flyers and then immediately going home and researching all about this, and I started learning about more alternative music. It was crazy. I still have that flyer to this day. It was kind of a wake-up call for me, learning about just this whole new world that I had been sheltered from. Chris minus humor says, "Hey May, your makeup is amazing, shocking in the best way. Definitely subscribe for more fun reactions. I wonder, would you react to my favorite band, Pale Waves? I think you might like their aesthetic at least." I haven't gotten too far into Pale Waves, but I really do love their song, There's a Honey. Their song, New Year's, I had a performer that I had booked who did that song for a New Year's theme show that I did. I really love their music. I love any kind of like neo-new wave kind of music nowadays that's coming out. There's a lot of renaissance to new wave that's happening that I really appreciate, and I'm kind of like incorporating that into not this album coming up, but the next one. I'm kind of looking into it. That and hair metal. I don't know what the fuck my problem is. Anyway, I can't sit with one genre. Miss Livixon says, "Are you a member or associated with the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence?" Here's the thing. That is one of the number one things that I get at the club is, are you a sister? I had a neighbor that I walked out while I was going to a gig, and they said, "Hey, oh my God, you're one of the sisters." And I had to explain to them. But it's so funny because whenever I started doing more of this makeup, it was more so based on old school, like goth club kids, a lot of Kabuki Starshine, if y'all know who I'm talking about. I also went to a Kiss concert when I was in 4th grade because my parents didn't believe in babysitters, I guess, at the time. And also they were kind of metalheads. And so they took me to a Kiss concert. And I remember that I loved the white faces. I loved a character. I loved these very specific signatures of a character that you can put on stage and kind of be immersive with the audience. And I remember they blew confetti everywhere and it was all over the floor. And I remember as a kid, I was just picking them up because I wanted something from the concert. And I picked up all this confetti, and at night, when I was in 4th or 5th grade, I had this little box of the confetti from the Kiss concert, and I would throw it in the air and act like I was on stage. It was so gay. But no, I do work with the sisters occasionally, just as, you know, just for regular drag events, but they do a lot of good, and I love seeing them out. They come out to the shows, especially on Mondays and Tuesdays at JR's, so I do appreciate working with them. They're great people. But no, I am not a sister, nor do I claim to be one. Emo6577 says, "Hello." Says, "Hello, it feels perfect for me that the algorithm served up this video to me. I'm only part way in, but I'm enjoying it so far. I am curious. I've been interested in getting into doing drag. I was thinking of going for like an androgynous, maybe mime type vibe, very trippy, and maybe not talking a lot. Anyways, I am a total makeup novice. Any tips on how to practice makeup with some intention? And how long does it take until it starts looking like how I imagine it in my head? Much love. Your perspectives on this topic are very fascinating. I've always felt like an outsider seeing girl-defined stuff because I'm not religious." The basic question there is, how do I get into drag? How do I start doing drag? How do I practice my makeup in a way that I want to see myself? I get that question a lot, especially at shows. Someone just asked me this question on Monday night, and my biggest answer, and I've said this in other videos too, my biggest answer to this is, don't be afraid to be ugly. Like, especially don't be afraid to be ugly for so long. These Instagram videos, these YouTube videos, they almost kind of create an expectation of you have to look good before you get on stage. You have to be perfect before you get on stage. And I think that's kind of ruined a lot of the fun of drag. I will tell you from my experience, I've done drag for 14 years, and I will say I was ugly for many of those first few years. I say 2 years, but it was more. I would say A, don't be afraid to pack it on hard. B, I would say to practice whatever makeup you want to do. Find some makeup ideas that you really like, practice them over and over and over again before you find your new style. And also, if you don't like what you see in the mirror, just find one thing, just like an eyebrow, a nose contour, I don't know, a lip. Find the one thing that you want to work on that day and just take the time to practice on that one thing, because makeup it's all a formula. You put it all together and it creates this kind of illusion. And that's the whole point, is practicing on those little things so you can create this whole thing that can be put together to create what you want to bring to the audience. And also just go on stage. Just go on stage. Because the thing is that you can practice makeup all day in your mirror. You can practice dancing all day in your mirror. But you don't know how you're going to act until you take those first 2 steps on stage. So the last part of the Q&A, I actually asked questions on my YouTube account on a little post that I made, and I got a few questions back on that, so let's look at those real quick. Ready to Sign says, this might sound strange, but I'm high, so F it, LOL. Were you always into punk/goth, or did it happen after you deprogrammed? Love your videos, and I love that you lead with empathy with your videos. Thank you. I was just doing this show, and a friend of mine that runs the show with me actually works in a church, and we talk about it a lot. We talk about deprogramming a lot. And I think that my big takeaway whenever I first started looking at, just watching YouTube videos, I remember the only atheists we had were atheist YouTubers who were very, very angry, the angry atheists. There was a lot of atheists that kind of talked down, and there was a lack of empathy. Again, there's space for every type of commentary on YouTube, but I think that there was a lack of empathy whenever there wasn't any other YouTubers doing this. It almost felt like they had deprogrammed and then forgot that they used to be these people. And I think that it's important to remember that you used to be this person. And a lot of Christianity, while it sounds harsh and mean and terrible, and they do say terrible things, I think that a lot of it still comes from that crippling fear that I had whenever I was a Christian. And so I try to lead with this understanding that whenever they say these things, they have this idea that if you're a nice person but you're not a Christian, you're going to hell. And that terrifies them just as much as it terrified themselves that they were going to hell because they did something wrong. So was I always into punk/goth, or did it happen after I deprogrammed? I think that it happened during my deprogramming. I was really scared of certain things. I didn't like horror movies. I didn't like goth music, scary music, rock and roll. Like, that was my parents' gig and that was my sister's gig. And I did not feel like that was my thing. And it was mostly because I was such a worrywart growing up and I didn't like dark things, but I always had a fascination with those things. Because they frightened me, it meant that I had a fascination. I think that means the same thing for a lot of different situations. People who have such a hyperfixation on something that they may be afraid of might be something that they may come to love later. With goth music and punk rock music, I think I really started to understand that there are so many facets of it, just like there are facets of religion, Christianity and stuff, that I was able to kind of sink into it at my own comfort level, because I really enjoyed it and I really loved it. But there were certain things that made it kind of hard to get into while I was a Christian. But I did love bands like Angel Spit, The Birthday Massacre, stuff like that. And I would have a critical eye, though, whenever I would listen to that music. And I think that growing up in a small town in East Texas was a very difficult way to jump into an alternative scene, because there wasn't many of us out there. We would just, I worked at the Hot Topic. We would go to IHOP later and listen to our favorite bands. Like, that was all we did. There was nothing to do. And so not a lot of shows happened. Not a lot of bands that I enjoyed would come to town, especially the weird bands that I was really into. I will say that I always did love Halloween. And I remember one day, whenever I was in Christian school, I didn't understand, because in the Church of Christ, Halloween is kind of just not talked about, but like different people have different opinions on it, and that's okay. In Christian school, with the school that I went to was very evangelical, and they were very against Halloween, and I just did not have a concept of that. And I was very happy about Halloween. I was always very excited about it. And so I started talking about, oh, well, what are you going to be for Halloween? What are you going to dress up as? And I remember that year, I think it was 2007, I was very excited to dress up as Ghostface again that year because I loved the movie Scream at that point. This kid just snapped at me and he goes, "We get it, you like Halloween." And I was like, what the fuck is the problem with Halloween? And this girl who was sitting in front of me turned around and she looked at me, and I will never forget, it is in my book, I have already written about it, but it is so funny. She said, "You know how Christmas is on Jesus's birthday? Well, whose birthday do you think that it is on Halloween? You do the math." What does that mean? What is that? All in all, it was a very slow transition, but it was a lot of things happening all at once within like the span of almost a decade, I believe. Cute cupcake. Cute cup. Bitch. What am I today? I stopped drinking like 7 months ago, and yet I'm worse at this shit. Cute Cupcake 8604 says, in terms of overcoming religious trauma, what advice would you give? What are your current thoughts on religion and religion versus organized religion? Very good question. So whenever it comes to religion versus organized religion, I have such mixed feelings about it. Because a lot of people in the church will say that it's not organized religion. It's become such an oversaturated term. Even in my church growing up, we started to kind of pivot to saying, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, because that meant so much more, and it kind of othered the people that were the crazy Christians. It's casting a wide net whenever you talk about those certain things. But so far as religion in general, I think that a lot of people, and I've said this before, a lot of people need religion. A lot of people find joy in their religion. They just truly have a very close relationship with their spirituality. And I completely respect that. I have a lot of friends that are Christian. I have a lot of friends in show business that are Christian and do have a very close relationship with God. And that's just not me. It's not, I haven't seen the evidence to support that for myself. And we do talk about it, and we've had deep conversations about it, and I do respect them. And even though I make jokes sometimes and they can make jokes about me, I do love that we have that deep understanding and that deep respect, because that's what kind of connects us all as humans. Anyway, so far as overcoming religious trauma, that is such a specific thing for each person. I've had my own religious trauma. I've had my own story, and it is completely different than a lot of other people's stories. And so I'm not going to come at this in a very particular way. With that said, I will say that having patience with yourself is kind of the key factor. And also a big portion of overcoming religious trauma is trying to find truth after that. And I think that this overarching idea of trying to find the perfect truth or trying to find absolute truth should not be your major goal. I think that truth is very specific to each person as well. And I think that having a distrust from one thing can keep somebody from trusting something else that may be good for them or may be therapeutic for them. And I think that it's just a matter of having an open mind and not allowing something that happened that was so deep and traumatic to dictate how you interact with friends, interact with family, interact with other people who are religious, people who aren't religious. And I think that it's a matter of documenting it for yourself, writing it down, journaling, meditating on it. These are all really helpful things that you can take a moment to sit down and realize that the world can wait. Your mental health is the most important thing to focus on. So look into therapy, read up on the subject of religious trauma, and also find community with other people who have gone through the same thing. And you can find that even just by watching YouTube videos and just learning about yourself through learning about other people's religious trauma and the things that they've gone through, finding those connections. Cute Cupcake also left another comment that said, "Hi, have you any advice for overcoming the guilt associated with what someone said when they were struggling with internalized homophobia?" I don't know the specific situation. I don't know if it's something that you said or something that you have guilt over, or something that someone said that you have guilt over with their internalized homophobia and you maybe came at it wrong. I'm just going to speak from my personal experience. I used to be a very homophobic person. I used to be a very transphobic person. I was raised to be these things. I was raised to be a pretty rancid person because I grew up in the woods in the South. It's a lot of a homogenized idea of what normal is and what the other is. I think a big portion of my deconstructing journey was overcoming the guilt that I had personally, because there was a friend of mine who used to preach with me at the Church of Christ as well, and he came out first. We ended up both coming out to each other. And I remember whenever he came out and he found himself more associating with pagan culture, with witchcraft and stuff. But I remember that I was still like stuck in this idea of being a good Christian, that we both didn't handle it well. We both did not respect each other's boundaries. I didn't like whenever he would say things like "God damn it" or "Jesus Christ" in a frustrated tone. And I would tell him, please don't say that because it hurts me whenever you say that, because that's my God. Not anymore. But he never respected that. I would say certain things about, well, that's your choice if you want to be gay. Because he came out first, I still wasn't out, which is like weird because look at me. I still wanted to believe that being gay was a choice, that being bisexual was a choice. All these things were a choice. We didn't respect each other in many aspects of our friendship, which is kind of why it fizzled out a few years later. I think that a big portion of it is conflict resolution. Learning how to always have empathy and seeing things from other people's perspectives, even if it's from a perspective that unfortunately might be destructive to yourself, to other people. Understand where they're coming from. Because again, a lot of people who are deep in a lot of trauma might be lashing out, and they don't realize that they're lashing out, or they don't realize what they're saying in the moment. And I think that it's important to give a little bit of grace, because that's the only way that I could forgive myself for all the things that I said whenever I was a Christian about gay people, about drag queens. So I think that it's important that if you want to focus on healing yourself, I think that it's a matter of having empathy for others, because you might be that person later. Zygos, I don't know how to say that name, says, how much knowledge did you have about the LGBT community while you were part of the church? Like, were you into LGBT media and stuff like that? I don't know where this comment's coming from, what place this comment's coming from. I get that twinge in the back of my head that it might be a comment that is asking if I was indoctrinated by the LGBT community, or that I had some childhood trauma that made me gay. And that's just not the case for me. It was pre-YouTube, pre-It Gets Better. There wasn't a lot of queer people that I could look up to. There wasn't a lot of queer media. It just kind of didn't exist. So growing up, I thought that I was the only one. I truly thought that I was the only person having this problem. No one talked about it. It was not discussed. It wasn't in media as much as it is now. I didn't have that privilege. And so I just thought that I was the only one. And it was so lonely. It was so traumatic and devastating to grow up thinking that you are this one weird case of being a broken person. And on a lighter note, not a lighter note, this last question. Hardworking diva. Also, big shout out to Xandra. That's my girl. She said, what advice would you give for people who want to support someone's deprogramming journey? I sometimes feel that people can be a bit cruel when someone is in the learning/unlearning phase, making fun of their past beliefs, belittling if they say something ignorant instead of educating them. I know it is not everyone's role and etc., but shit, people need an off-ramp. I don't want to do to them what the church already did when they left, you know? I've kind of touched on this a little bit, but it is a very delicate situation. And I know that I've already responded to this in the comments, but I do want to say this to you guys. Whenever somebody is in a deprogramming situation, I think we were talking about it in church years ago, and I remember that we were talking about secular media. Someone was talking about how they couldn't watch the show House anymore because someone was praying in a church, and I believe Dr. House came in and said, well, if you're done talking to your imaginary friend, can we get out of here? That is, even after deprogramming and deconstructing, I still take offense to that kind of rhetoric, that this person is just a stupid child who believes in a fairy tale, believes in a sky daddy. I hated hearing that whenever I was a Christian. I had a friend that I remember that I said that I didn't want to transfer schools again, that I wanted to stay in my Christian school just to graduate and get it the fuck over with. And I remember that she said, well, have fun with Jesus humping school. And like, it was stupid. I've never heard that before, never heard it again. But I remember just taking so much offense to that, because even whenever I was going through my deprogramming journey, that made me think that there was nowhere safe for me to fall into. No one safe to talk to, because they were so just mean about it. And I believe that coming in with a level of kindness and understanding is so much more important. And I think that a big thing that people always do whenever they have a friend that's going through a deconstruction journey, they have this idea that, okay, you're coming out, so let me help you out more. Your religion's terrible. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't help. If anything, it makes them feel like they can't talk to you. I think that having a level of patience is the first step in being able to talk to them, and really just listening, because that's all that somebody who's deconstructing really wants from the beginning, is someone who just listens. And also, along with that level of patience and that level of listening skills, I think that there needs to be a caveat in your head that a deconstruction journey does not always end in the person not believing what they believe. A big portion of a lot of my friends, especially in the queer community, the people that are Christian, have gone through a deconstruction journey, but they still are Christian because they found a way where their spirituality and their spiritual life can also coincide with them being gay, being queer, being trans. And I think that that's beautiful that they can find that. I found that for a second and it didn't work out for me. But if someone else finds that, it's not my job to push them completely out of something that makes them comfortable, something that makes them happy. I envy that kind of level of comfort and happiness. I think that I just want to support somebody that I think is a good person and support them on a journey that could make them a better person, because it's just like any other type of character building exercise, if anything. So with that being said, I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you for all your questions. Next week, I will be talking about finally my growing up in my deprogramming journey. Again, I have to script it out. This was a very rambly video. I have to script it out. I have to be structured and I really want to do it justice. Again, y'all are going to hear about murder. Y'all are going to hear about me sneaking out to the gay club. Y'all are going to hear about how I almost got kicked out of school for sneaking out to the gay club, how I shaved my eyebrows and started a punk band in 10th grade. All of these things and more will happen next week. So I appreciate y'all for sticking around this long. Thank you so much. If you have any more questions, leave them in the comments below. And in 2 weeks, I will be going back to my React videos. So if you have anything that you want me to react to, I would love to hear about it in the comments as well. Make sure that you check out my music, check out my album Monsters, anywhere music is sold and streamed, and also check out my next shows with my band. We're doing more shows, which is really great. We'll be in McAllen soon. We're going to be doing the What the Femme Fest out in Denton at Rubber Glove Studio this summer, as well as looking at New Orleans, Austin, and other places. So also a big thank you to everybody in Houston for coming out to the show at Avant Garden. We had a lovely time with May May Graves and the Grave Dancers, and we can't wait to bring you some more. I will see y'all next week. Have a great week. Make good choices. We're all God's children. Some of us aren't. It's fine. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye!